Hello, and welcome back to another EDH deck design video. Today, I'm going to be doing something a little different. Um, I tend to brew and design theoretical deck lists far before actually pursuing them in paper form. And this is one of the examples of me using a website to construct a deck list. This is Tapped Out. There's a few great sites. Tapped Out's pretty good. There's MTG Vault and Reddit and Salvation, different forums that are also really good, where you can construct and assemble cards and get metrics for what your deck can do, mana curves and whatnot. Really good at brewing decks without actually pursuing the purchase. So this is a test video to see how this sort of deck tech, what kind of feedback, how it actually does as a video on YouTube. This particular deck is for Maraxus. The reason the Vanguard is brought up here, this is where the idea for this deck came from. One of my tables, my metas, we had the idea to create specific generals that had their paired Vanguard, and we would start the games with the Vanguard in the command zone as an emblem. There were some issues with that initial idea because I really wanted to do Volrath, and I was flat out told no because I'm kind of known for graveyard shenanigans. Another friend got really butthurt because of us telling him he could not use Titania for very obvious reasons. But took about 2.5 weeks of me brewing around the idea of Maraxus. I ended up with this deck. Come 3 weeks back into that table, the whole table has decided to disband the idea because someone particular just couldn't get what they wanted. You know who you are, bitch tits. So the deck I ended up brewing, although for Maraxus, this is a really rare general. I am going to have to zoom this in. Let me get my mouse over here real quick. Yeah, I am not quite farsighted, but I like my words tiny. Let's do it this one so you can actually see what I have. Maraxus here is a really awesome character. I love anything that has to do with the Keldon storyline. Those books were fantastic. For example, I love Latoya. She's one of my favorite characters from there. Maraxus is he's got a pretty elaborate history. I'm not going to get into his character. The Vanguard card is also not going to be important for this video because this is a deck tech video for him as a commander and EDH as a general. There's just not a lot of information to work with here. That's a good size. So Maraxus of Keld, he's pretty rare. Most people will know him for the Bane reference due to his mask and his unnatural muscles. He's a big beefy dude. It is 4 mana, or 6 mana, 4 red, for a star. I believe he is a human warrior. I think that's right. His creature type's not that important. His ability, although that's star, his power and toughness is equal to the number of untapped artifacts, creatures, and lands he counts himself. So, for example, if you had 6 lands and you tapped out to cast Maraxus, and he resolves, you have a 1/1, because he is the only untapped creature. In your next turn, you will untap, he'll be a 7/7. When you declare him to attack, he will shrink down to a 6/6 because he has tapped to attack. For what research I've been able to do, there's just not a lot of decks with him. Most decks seem to be some kind of token creature swarm. And that's, I guess, for the time era of those decks when they're created. There's just nothing super good recently. That's probably was okay. Personal opinion, if that type of deck, if you're going creature swarm, you would probably want Martin Stromgold, who would be strictly better. Or in recent years, there's also Krinko, who is infinitely better than whatever creature brew you can make, because even like Krinko and Perforos are kind of the decks for token creation in mono red because they are great win conditions. Maraxus is just legitimately not that good, and building around this was kind of a really good exercise, I suppose, in research and optimization. So I chose to go a different route. If you're looking at the numbers over here, there's not a lot of creatures, but there's a gigantic pile of artifacts. I will go through each card individually and explain why it's here and how it helps Maraxus. But in short, this is a Scrap Mastery focused deck. Scrap Mastery is living death for artifacts. This is a massive artifact shenanigan deck. I chose to go this route because, to be honest, creatures are the most unreliable permanent type in the format of EDH and Commander. It's cluttered with multiplayer. There's always board wipe, spot removal. No matter what 1v1 or multiplayer you're playing, there's always answers for creatures. But artifacts, although there's not always a bunch of artifact removal unless it's a mass sweeper. And you can tune a deck to not really care if they get sweeped by doing a pseudo-reanimation effect. So having harder to deal with permanents I felt would be better for Maraxus, making him more resilient and consistent. I need to stop right here and reemphasize a couple things. This is a theoretical deck. This deck was never printed in paper. I've never actually held a Maraxus card. I probably have. I just don't think I've ever played with one. All playtesting I have done has been using this site's tool up here and essentially doing theoretical gameplays where I would assume half of my permanents would be destroyed on every turn or so. So, from doing many games using this playtest feature with this current list, approximately around turn 8 to 10 and upward, Maraxus would be at least a 10 to 12 power. And again, that is assuming that half my stuff is dealt with. It's not magical Christmas land where everything's perfect. That's unrealistic to believe that will ever happen. So what we're looking at is a gigantic dude. And this is not really a commander where you can just cast the big thing, swing with the big thing, and hope to win. You have to be very calculated when you choose to attack with Maraxus, because that may tell you what you're actually allowed to play before, mid, or after combat. Because if, for example, in that example, if you swing with him and he shrinks to a 6/6, if someone chump blocks him with a 5/5, and you tap a land, you shrink him to a 5/5, and he will die, because he will become a 0/0, he will have enough damage on him to kill him. So this is not really just a big slugger. This is more shenanigans and cerebral. This is not just the cast the big thing, swing with the big thing. If you're looking for something like that, check out one of my Red Achroma videos, because she's a bit better at that style. But let's go through the deck. The deck is very little creature-wise. Also, if there is a permanent that is also a creature artifact, for example, or a creature land, it is a single permanent. It will only count 1. So Burnished Heart, for example, only counts as 1. Burnished Heart, although, is a fantastic card. While I said creatures are the hardest to deal with permanents, lands, basic lands, creatures are the easiest to deal with permanent in this format. Lands are the hardest. So while artifacts are great, something like a basic land is much more reliable for Maraxus. So Burnished Heart is a shoo-in here. Same thing with Solemn down here, Solemn Simulacrum. Land Ramp, basic Land Ramp, is fantastic because it is a hard to deal with permanent that will permanently boost him. This is a great 2-for-1. Again, this is an artifact shenanigans deck, so we do have goodies like Goblin Welder, so we can pop things like that back. Deal Broker is the best mono-red looter that we have. There are technically mono-red looters, like the Goblin Rummager and the Mad Prophet guy with haste. Those are strictly worse than him. This lets you draw first, then discard a card. The others, in mono-red, they make you discard first, then draw. This one gives you information, more information before you choose what to discard, which is important. And again, it's an artifact, so we can recur it sometimes. Duplicant is fantastic spot removal. Goblin Welder is probably one of the best 1-drops you could ever pray for in a mono-red deck like this. It's a target player sacks an artifact, and you get one from the graveyard play. It's ours, usually. This has so many shenanigans to go with it. It is a usually kill-on-target sort of threat, especially when you have something like a duplicant and you keep cycling that back and forth with like a memory jar every single turn. This is also really great if you have a general that has a tap effect, because you usually have untap effects in your deck. Nullspine Dragon does exactly what this deck needs. We want stuff in our graveyard because, again, it's a scrap mastery deck. That's one of the win conditions, one of the more optimal and powerful win conditions. So it allows us to dump things, and we do hope to be hitting for a lot. Again, we need to be manipulative. We may not want to ever tap out because we make cool Maraxus, but if something like this is the reason we're tapping out, it's definitely worth it. Kuldutha Forge Master is card disadvantage. Most of our artifacts are here for some pseudo advantage in some way, shape, or form, but it is a strict tutor for one of our many better artifacts, and we of course may recur it. Magus of the Wheel is a fantastic new card. It's somewhere in between the power level of Reforge the Soul and Wheel of Fate, in my opinion. I'm running all of these over here. The problem, there's Reforge the Soul is a 5 mana costing Wheel of Fortune. There is Wheel of Fate, which is Suspend. So it's a 3-drop wheel. The problem is that he has to tap and he has no haste himself. This has the same issue that Wheel of Fate does, which is your opponents are given time to actually play out for a turn. Wheel of Fate is probably the worst of these because it gives an opponent 4 turns to sculpt their hand, dump their early stuff, and get ready for this to go off. This gives them 1 turn, assuming you don't have haste somehow. But again, it's another wheel effect. We have a lot of effects, including the memory jar over here. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 effects that are essentially wheels. Null Spine doesn't quite count. But still, this is what the deck needs. We are filling the graveyard with artifacts. We are replenishing our hand. And this is actually just good disruption since he comes out early. Pilgrim's Eye is generic. It is going to count and give Maraxus +1/+1 as a creature, but it gives us the all-important basic land. I should also reemphasize, when I built this deck, I just made it visible to the public not too long ago here, but this was before the mulligan rule change. So my deck has a lot of tiny cantrips, and I chose to go with 35 lands. This was before they got rid of the partial Paris mulligan. The Vancouver mulligan is now what is legal for EDH. If you were to pursue something like this, I would recommend going up to 38 lands. Maybe more ramp, something over there along with that. But again, Pilgrim's Eye is important because we have a 6 mana costing general. This gets a basic that lets us have another permanent. It's not quite a 2-for-1, it's a replacement effect. Being that it will most likely chump block something, then it becomes a 2-for-1. Scarecrow is a generic filler. Not a lot of artifact creatures to recur. It's mostly here to sack itself and cantrip. Kind of just a cheap blocker, sack it, draw a card, something we can recur later with Scrap Mastery. Going on down the list, Slowbad. This is, in my opinion, the best Scrap Mastery general because it's a 2-drop from your command zone, and it just lets you sack your entire board whenever you find that Scrap Mastery, so you can go off and do whatever your dirtily deck does. He's in this deck for exactly that reason. Typically, the better plays here is to have something like a Myconisynth Lattice, and then Insurrection everyone's creatures, sack all their entire board, then do your Scrap Mastery, get everything back on your side. Fun things. But then we have Solemn for the ramp, just a generically good card, also really good with the Goblin Welder. And finally, Wormcoil Engine, another generically good card. This is just a generic beater, something nice to fall back on. Some people like other generic fillers like the Steel Hellkite. It's another one. There's only one enchantment that fit into the deck. It is Outpost Siege. This is an iffy inclusion because of the reliance of Scrapmaster. If you are focusing your entire deck around one specific card, you may not want the quote-unquote card advantage staple here. Although, in my opinion, it's definitely still worth a cut. Scrap Mastery does not have to be played to win the game because we also have a lot of other options. You would also think with Maraxus there, you could have some damage doublers, like a Furnace Effects or even Gratuitous Violence. That does sound really, really good with Maraxus. You can even do some kind of Devotion route there. My personal opinion, although, there wasn't enough room. I needed as much artifact support as I can to make the deck function. And the enchantments, while great, they were situational. They didn't give them a boost. They just didn't make the cut. Going down to the Walkers. Again, this is a deck I have not actually updated for about a month or so. The brand new Chandra, that is a one-sided wheel +1 card, definitely would be in this deck. It does exactly what this deck wants to do. It's like the Nullspine Dragon. It just keeps on helping us fill our hand, put stuff in the graveyard, and dig for that one special Scrap Mastery. Pyromaster, although, is pseudo card advantage for mono red. It's another exile effect. It's exactly like Outpost Siege, although this one will probably die faster. Again, you may want to be careful with running these if you might accidentally pop into that Scrap Mastery before you can legally cast it, and then it's just gone forever. Duretti, although, is probably the second best artifact shenanigans general next to Slowbad. He does, again, what we want. We can reanimate artifacts. We can draw 2, discard 2. Just lets us filter through the deck really good and fast. A lot of Duretti decks tend to be pseudo-prison style decks or some kind of like stacks style decks. It's really not something I think is an efficient thing to do. But again, he is a perfect example of what this deck needs. Going to a few instances here. So it's really important to remember, Maraxus shrinks every time you tap a land. So while you would think you want to do some combat tricks, you really can't. like without making him small. So the only good ones I chose were these two really itty bitty ones. This one costs 2 mana, so by casting this, it's going to shrink Maraxus -2, -2. If we have like a gauntlet effect out, it may be only -1, -1 because our lands tap for 2. But this gives Maraxus Trample. Trample is the absolute most important attribute that he needs. He is vanilla. He's a big, but he's vanilla, and you need Trample. Otherwise, something like a Bitter Blossom token is just going to wreck your day. Like, there's really not a lot of answers in this deck for a Bitter Blossom. So Trample is very important. This will give him double strike and Trample. And Fatal Frenzy, while reducing him -3, -3, doubles his power and gives him Trample. Again, from playtesting, somewhere between turn 8 and 10, his power is usually somewhere between 10 and 12. Again, assuming half of my board has been dealt with in that theoretical gameplay. Half the board may never be dealt with, and something like these two could very easily make Maraxus a one-hit kill. That is why they are worth including. Commune is possibly a card I would maybe consider cutting next, replacing this with like the Chandra. It's another exile effect, so we may accidentally get rid of the Scrap Mastery. But this is also a really powerful card if you're running all of the gauntlet effects. We have Cage Sun and the 2 gauntlets and the artifact copy thing down there. So we have technically 3.5 gauntlets. So late game, that could give you an explosive play if you have the mana. This is actually really good early game too, because it spans over 2 turns. If you just need landfall, you can do this like 4 or 5, and you have the lands to play for a turn and next turn. So it's really an all-around good card. Again, if your deck is, if something like this is the absolute linchpin of the deck, the necessary card, you don't want exile things like that. The land base I didn't put a lot of effort into. Again, after the mulligan rule change, you would probably want this to go up to 38. But we are doing mono red, and one of the better effects mono red has is like Blood Moon effects or Ruination effects. So doing a lot of basic lands is really good. Valakut is fantastic. Train Generator helps shoot out extra lands for Valakut and ramps into our general. Myriad Landscape is also a 2-for-1 effect. This is the type of deck, since you are doing all these wheel effects, that you would actually want to consider Crucible of Worlds and Fetch Lands, because again, that is card advantage and something that mono red sorely needs. Going on to the rest of our spells here, All Is Dust is probably one of the best board wipe. Oh, I just clicked the button. Oh, crap. Okay, so my computer here is an absolute rubbish computer. Let me go back here real quick. The reason I don't record videos very often on here, like I'm okay with Camtasia every now and then. Like, I used to record a lot of MTGO gameplay footage with Camtasia, but ever since they updated MTGO, I got really pissed off with the layout. And Camtasia at the time was also giving me grief because I'm just not so happy with some of the effects they've changed too. And this computer can't tolerate a lot of that. Let's get back here. Okay, it's loaded now. Get off my screen. But, okay, back to the deck. Tangents. All Is Dust is probably the best board wipe this deck could ever have. Past the 2 enchantments, or 1 enchantment, 2 planeswalkers, and like, what, 5 creatures? That leaves like 90 cards out of a 100 card deck that this is immune to this. That's fantastic. Anger of the Gods is another really good board wipe because it is an exile effect. This gets rid of a lot of problem cards. The example I used to use was it gets rid of Prophet Krufix forever. Well, Prophet's gone now, but this still gets rid of a lot of really obnoxious cards permanently. Blast Act is the last board wipe because it's just really good. The mana cost on this tends to be low. We do, of course, have Necrom's Memorial coming up, so Maraxus may be pro-red, so he could survive that. Insurrection is an alternate win condition in many games. It depends on the number of your opponents. If you only play with 1 to 2 opponents, this is usually not worth the inclusion. The table I was going to play this with was a 5-player table, so this is definitely the kind of card that would fit at that table. Recoup is here specifically for Scrap Mastery. This is a flashback spell, so we can recast Scrap Mastery. It only works on sorceries, like Scrap Mastery. If you are doing a more spell-based deck, you may be interested in, like, Past in Flames, which is more expensive to cast. It can target... It doesn't target, it gives all instances and sorceries in your graveyard flashback. In this particular deck, there's not a lot of spells, not a lot of sorceries. We just wanted Recoup. Reforge the Soul is one of the wheels. This one is a Miracle Wheel. Then we have, of course, the Wheel of Fate, which is probably the weakest wheel next to, like, the Command, which sucks worse. Then it's just the fact that you give your opponents 4 turns to sculpt their hands. This is not really beneficial. Most of the time, the good thing about running a Wheel of Fortune is that it is disrupting an opponent's hand. But this right here is a broadcasted statement of exactly what's coming up. Then, of course, Wheel of Fortune. If you're doing this in paper Magic, I always recommend getting like the collector's edition ones or one of the old white border ones, because like even the promo ones are just creeping up into retarded price ranges now. Going on to the artifacts, these are the primary permanents of the deck past lands. So again, keep in mind, we can't get away from too far from Maraxus here. He's a star. He's not gonna be just a 6/6. Like we have creatures, lands, and artifacts. Most Maraxus deck lists I've seen, again, were creature token based. Not the best of ideas, because the thing that's going to kill Maraxus will also kill the tokens, which defeats the point of running Maraxus. Now, the alternative there is doing artifact good stuff. Akroma's Memorial is here just for Maraxus. Normally, I mean, in smaller things like a Slowbad, this isn't really worth the cut. But this technically reads Maraxus of Keld gets +1/+1, and creatures you control get flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, pro, black, red. So he could be immune to our own burn effects. He gets trample. Again, trample is more important. Technically, this gives him +2/+2 because of the vigilance. I forgot about that. Alchemist Vial is a cute inclusion. When I first started brewing this, I had all of these, like the spell bombs, like the pyrite ones in here. I like this better because it draws you the card as soon as this comes in. So it's an early play, so you can keep on digging for the lands. But again, Maraxus has no evasion. He needs trample, but we don't always have trample, so this could be a way of getting him through. Or it also could be stopping someone from killing you with, like, Kozilek. Armillary Sphere is usually something that doesn't quite make the cut even in budget lists. It is a 2-for-1, but in a scrap mastery deck, this is the kind of card that will most likely come back and be used more than once. Batterskull is amazing. Like, this is one of the cards that a Maraxus of Keld deck needs. Equipped creature gets +4/+4 vigilance, lifelink. That's nice. Maraxus of Keld gets +6/+6 because it counts as an artifact and gives him vigilance. Fantastic. Caged Sun is another buff for all my red creatures. It gives Maraxus +2/+2, counting as an artifact. Chromatic Sphere, of course, is just another filler. It's like the Vial. It's a small cantrip that may be useful early game. Same thing. Codex Shredder is here just to fill our graveyard and eventually pop something back. Commander Sphere. There's a lot of artifact ramp that likes to replace itself and sacrifice to be drawn as a card. So that's exactly what this does. Darksteel Ingot is a generic ramp that doesn't tend to go away. Darksteel Plate. We do have to be careful, because if Maraxus is, sure, indestructible from Darksteel Plate, if somehow every single permanent on my board got tapped, and I don't have like a gauntlet out to give him +1/+1, he will still die. Because if everything's tapped, he is a 0/0, so indestructible will not save him. But that's still important enough in combat that I can keep on swinging with him, and the plate will usually always be untapped, so that I can just be a little bit more lackadaisical with my attacks with him. Dreamstone Hedron goes with the Commander Sphere. This is usually the worst of the artifact ramps that sack to draw cards. It just costs too much. This probably needs to be refined a bit here. This could be like a Thrawn Dynamo or a Warren Power Stone for early game plays. Expedition Map is here for Valakut or some other techie land that you may want to fill in. Gauntlets. Again, these two go with the Caged Sun. They give... I just clicked it again. I hate this computer so much. Get back here. This would be nice if I actually got around to getting a new computer. I've been really stubborn about this. Okay, Gauntlet effects. They give Maraxus +2/+2. The mana is nice. This is essentially a +2/+2 boost for our general and a threat for the opponent to want to blow up. If you have interest in a Gauntlet of Might and you play Paper Magic, again, look for the Collector's Edition ones. Even like a revised one, like a white border one's way overpriced, but a Collector's Edition or International one, those will be about $30-ish. You can like bid on eBay. And it's got square corners, yes, but it represents the card, and it's, yeah. Hedron Archive is a really great new card. It is the middleman between Mindstone and the Dreamstone Hedron. So it's essentially right in the middle. It is strictly better than Eye of the Urgolem and Sisay's Ring. And it's just drawing 2 cards. This is definitely worth including. Ichor Wellspring and the other Myconosynth Wellspring. These two come into the battlefield and have an effect, and when they die, they have an effect. These are really good in decks like with Slowbad and Ready. Essentially, these also give our general +1/+1. So you could literally think of this as a crusade for our general, just our general, that also draws a card or gets you a basic land. Definitely worth it because they will at some point in time be dying. And to be perfectly honest, from what the example and theoretical gameplays I've seen, Journeyer's Kite really needs to be in this deck. Again, we need as many permanents as possible, specifically lands, basic lands being the hardest thing to deal with, and Maraxus really needs that. So Journeyer's Kite in an early hand really can get you to the late game because it gives you every single landfall you need, and this deck really needs to make sure it has landfall every turn. We have Loxodon Warhammer because Maraxus needs Trample. Again, this gives Maraxus +4/+1 in Trample and Lifelink. Memory Jar is the other wheel effect, which is fun to dirtle around with the Goblin Welder. We have the Mind Stone, as previously mentioned, and Mind's Eye, which, again, it gives Maraxus +1/+1, but we can also draw cards. We've already gone over the Wellspring. Let's go on down here a bit further. Come on. Now we have Naginata, another Trample equipment. Again, this gives our general +4/+1 in Trample. And then we have an O-Stone, which has slowly crept up in price again. I really do like cards like Perilous Vault. We do not want to exile our artifacts. So O-Stone, Oblivion Stone, and a Nevermoral's Disc are the obvious cards you want to put in here. A Disc didn't make the cut. I mean, something like that could definitely be in here. Phyrexian Furnace and Scrabbling Claws are a little bit of graveyard hate. Again, these are easy, quick, early game cantrips. An artifact we can dump in the graveyard, draw a card. And these are just good at dirtling around a little bit early to get rid of stuff from opponents' graveyards. And you don't want the Relic of Prisoners there because, again, you don't want to exile your own graveyard. Power Matrix. I've been looking for a deck to fit this in for a long time. I am really happy that this actually fits so well with Maraxus. So yes, by tapping it, the existence of having this as an artifact does shrink him -1/-1, but it gives it right back in Flying Hand, First Strike, and Trample. So this literally is built almost exclusively just for what feels like Maraxus. It gives him everything he needs to get through. Sculpting Steel is a copy of whatever nasty card we've already resolved. Usually I hold on to this until I have a Gauntlet in play, or I'll hold up both till I have the mana to get both out. Soul Ring is here for obvious reasons. Staff and Nin. You may not want to tap this to burn if you're attacking with Maraxus, because it's, again, another +1/+1. Sword of the Animist. I was on the fence between this and Sword of Vengeance. Sword of Vengeance is Trample and Vigilance for our general, which is technically, it would give him like +4 no, or +4/+2. This one I chose over that because, it gives him +1/+1, but this is something that gets lands into play, which is much more important. The issue, of course, we don't have a lot of tiny creatures to like attack with this thing, the best being Pilgrim's Eye. So that's a kind of a meta call. I just really like this card. I've been putting this in all my mono red decks. Getting basic lands to play is amazing, especially when you have a Valakut, which makes even like double combat steps fantastic with Godo. Talk about Godo. There's his Maul. Again, it gives our general +4/+4 in Trample. Pretty hard to top that for its 3-drop equipment. Unstable Obelisk. We can sack it to destroy something. So again, it's putting itself into the graveyard. We can nuke a problem, permanent. And finally, Wayfarer's Bauble, one of my favorite 1-drop ramps in non-green. Okay, let me catch my breath here. So that is the deck list, the current theoretical deck list I constructed for Maraxus of Keld. Again, this is all theory. This deck has also not been updated with the newest expansion of cards. This type of deck is hinging on Scrap Mastery, a gigantic thing, an Insurrection, or beating down with like retarded card value. There's a lot of things going on in this deck, but they all synergize with each other because it's just what artifacts do. Over to the metrics here. Curve on the deck's actually pretty good. The highest here is Blast Act. That's, of course, never going to be cast for 9. If it is, that's why are you casting it for 9. Second up, we have that as Insurrection, I believe. Is that right? Let me shrink this a little bit back. Yeah, we got Insurrection. Let's just make it so I can actually read it now. There we go. That's a little better. Then going on down the list, the curve curves out really nicely. Like, most of the deck is, of course, 3 to 4 mana. There's a lot of early cantrips and lots of ways of filtering to lands. So we really want to be playing a lot of stuff turn 3 and plus. But this deck is designed again for a 5-player table. There's lots of customization things you can do to make this better. But this is just my take on Maraxus. Now, depending on how this video loads, again, I haven't loaded anything with Camtasia up for a while. I know my old MTGO videos have been taken down because I didn't really give two shits about the music that was playing in the background, and they were all tagged. I'm not really going to upload MTGO playback videos anymore. There's just too many channels that do it better than me, and I'm a hipster, and I play stupid decks, so there's really no point in me doing that. But if this particular video gets any good feedback, or if people have interest, I do a lot of brewing. Let me shrink. This is really driving me nuts. They're so big. So I brew a lot on multiple websites. Like, most of this, if you were to go up to my thing up here, Herzog Nakab, and you would see most of these are actually invisible. I would probably have to make some of these visible to the, like, this is just one site, but I have many. These are like the decks that I currently have built, and I mean, I do a lot of theoretical decks. The issue is I tend to delete them if I know I'm never going to build them. Like, I was actually about to delete this, and I realized how rare of a general he was. There's no good... I don't want to be mean to other people. There's no legitimate 2016 Maraxus EDH deck list currently on YouTube. So I had to make one. And when I realized there was nothing to... When I was doing research for him, there's just nothing new. I really wanted to share this because, I mean, that's... Yeah, you can do your own research, but a lot of people don't really care about researching decks. They just want to pick up an idea and go with it. Or they literally don't bother using websites like I do to construct and brew. They just open their binder and go with it. They don't know what else to look for, what's actually printed. There's a lot of old cards that are great. There's also a lot of thematic cards that are great. But there's other things I could share, like I have a creatureless Maelstrom Wonder deck, or a Thopter combo deck with Chandra's Parents, or like a 1v1 use. So yeah, I have a lot of other janky shit. Some of the ones I've even dismantled, I have two old guys. Yeah, I've already posted my Circuit video. I ran, for the longest time, a Ramses Overdark multiplayer enchantment deck. And again, this is a type of general that's really rare. And I have a really refined deck list, although this one... When was the last time I updated this thing? Let's see here. Ramses, blah, 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 blah. But anyways, that's what I'm thinking. Like, if something like this actually has good feedback, I could go through... Yeah, 8 months is the last time I posted this, and I've talked about it because I was copying it over from, like, another website. But if this type of thing actually has good feedback, I could do more theoretical deck lists. I do a lot of other formats, too. Like, I have my modern, legacy shit all over the place here. This will be interesting. I don't really like the idea of telling people, giving advice without having physically played the deck, but I have been playing since Mirage. So when I go through and do deck tests, like play testing, oh, this is probably going to crash this. This computer sucks so bad. I literally do this at my work computer. So the play test here is probably going to crash and load. When I do the playtest, I'm always assuming that half of my threats and permanents are always dealt with every other turn. Everyone playtests in a different way. You never want to playtest in a magical Christmas land here. So that is a fucking sweet hand. Oh my god. So look at this. We have a turn 1 bobble, turn 2 kite or ramp. And I probably actually would do... Well, it depends, because if I draw a land, I would probably want to have this guy out. Is this the one that gets a land? Draws a card. No, let's just do it. See, this is literally what I would do. Like, assuming that there's no threats coming up, and like obviously this deck doesn't have a lot of answers to things. Then we just go on next turn. Okay. Since I did not draw a land here, I would be inclined to actually pass and pop this, because I don't really want to discard any of these guys just yet. I wouldn't mind putting this in the graveyard. Yeah. See, this is I used to do a lot of MTGO playback and my own commentary with my gravelly, nasty-ass voice. Not the prettiest of things to listen to, and I'm also pretty rude. So I don't know if me actually commenting my own videos is a good idea. I'm probably going to stop here. So, yeah, this is Maraxus. I'm posting this as an experiment. If this pans out, I may upload more exotic generals that don't see a lot of play. because I brew all the time. I delete everything I do not build or end up building in paper. I was about to delete this when I chose to do this, so yeah, well, just save this here. If you have any feedback, always welcome. If you have any funny Bane impersonations of Maraxus, yeah, just check out this dude's mask. See how zoomed in I can get here? Oh my god, I hate this so much. Look, I feel like an old person with a giant screen. So I work in customer service at a particular building where we deal with a lot of elderly, non-tech savvy people, and I imagine 90% of them have their screen blown up to something like this. Oh god. But yeah, look at that dude. He could arm wrestle 50 people at once. But yeah, any feedback if you've ever played Maraxus, if you have any input. Again, this deck is in need of updating for two things: the mulligan change, and also the most recent expansion. Things like the new Chandra would definitely need to be in here. But yeah, open to feedback. Enjoy. Have fun. Bye.